Methods. Interviews. Although social surveys can be conducted using written questionnaires, sociologists often use the interview method as an alternative. The interview involves what is known as social interaction between the researcher and the researched. By the end of this topic, you should understand the differences between structured and unstructured interviews, be able to evaluate the strengths and limitations of the different types of interviews, be able to apply your understanding of the interviews to the style of education. Different types of interviews. There are 4 main types of interviews that are used by sociologists. Structured, formal interviews. Unstructured, informal interviews. Semi-structured interviews. Group interviews in the style of one of the above. We can now consider each of these interviews, who they are used by, why they are used, and the main advantages and disadvantages of each. 1. Structured, formal interviews. These are preferred by positivists as they are more structured, generally provide quantitative data, high in reliability, and more value-free. These are based on structured, closed-ended, pre-coded questionnaire. The questionnaire in an interview is referred to as the interview schedule. The interviewer will not stray from the interview schedule. The questions are asked in order and the interviewer will not deviate from the schedule or probe beyond the answers received. Quick to complete. Data easy to quantify. High reliability, closed questions. Useful in finding factual data. Less as interviewer's bias. Weaknesses. Interview schedule is restrictive. Lack of probing means lack of detail. Imposition problem. Researcher decides the responses. Lacks validity. Still chance of interviewer bias. 2. Unstructured, informal interviews. Preferred by interpretivists as they generally provide qualitative data, high in validity and more value-laden subjective, meaning, motivations, feelings, etc. These are sometimes referred to as discovery interviews and are more like a guided conservation than a strict structured interview. An interview schedule might not be used, and even if one is used, they will contain open-ended questions that can be asked in any order. Some questions might be added and missed as the interview progresses. Strengths. High response rate. Interviewer writes and reads, can build a rapport with the correspondent, can probe for detail, high in validity, free-flowing and more relaxed, useful in finding meanings and motivations, can explore new ideas, less restricted. Weaknesses, no structure, go off the point, still a chance of interviewer bias. Small scale. Difficult to quantify, qualitative, responsive. Highly subjective, value-laden. Time-consuming. Could get too personal. 3. Semi-structured interviews. Each interview consists of the same questions, usually in the same order, but uses a mix of closed-ended, pre-coded questions and open-ended questions. Strengths. High response rate. Interviewer writes and reads. Increases both reliability and validity, can build a rapport with the respondent more easily than structured interview, flexible but still structured to some extent, helps find balance between objectivity and subjectivity. Weaknesses, still a chance of interviewer bias, never fully reliable or valid, difficult to compare and quantify due types of data, still restricts responses, time consuming compared to structured interviews. 4. Group interviews. Refers to interviews where a dozen or so respondents are interviewed together, also known as a focus group. They can be structured or unstructured, but are usually semi-structured. Strengths. Lots of information quickly. Can observe group interactions. Group dynamics help respondents relax. More natural behaviour rather than a private interview. Respondents can help each other develop their answers and introduce each other to new ideas and views. Weaknesses, difficult to build individual rapport. Group dynamics means the respondents might blend into the background. Conformity to the group. Group dynamics means respondent might exaggerate or lie. Could be difficult to control the interview. Could cause conflict between respondents. A word on interviewer bias. Whether critiquing an interview method, regardless of the type of interview, interviewer bias can always be raised to as an evaluative consideration. This refers to the way that behavior, or simply the presence, of the interviewer may influence the responses that they receive from the respondent. This could be affected by the following characteristics of the interviewer. Social characteristics: the interviewer's age, gender, ethnicity, perceived social class, accent. Personal characteristics: the interviewer's body language, tone of voice, style of dress, appearance. 3. Status and differences: whether or not the interviewer shares status and power with the respondent or decides to keep a distant and clear power division. 4. Leading questions: prompting the respondent to answer questions in a particular way and/or make assumptions about the respondent with the questions asked.